This week isn't just big, it's game-changing. General Hospital.
The lights inside General Hospital had never felt so cold. Marco Rios had always believed that buildings carried energy, that walls absorbed laughter, secrets, grief. As he lay on the hospital bed, the sterile white ceiling above him felt impossibly distant, like a sky he would never reach. The rhythmic beeping of the monitor beside him echoed like a countdown he could not stop. Just hours earlier, everything had been different. The fall. Marco had walked into his office at Miller and Davis with purpose that morning, unaware that fate had already written his final chapter. He remembered the faint smell of coffee, the quiet hum of the city beyond the window, and the weight of decisions pressing against his chest. Then came Ross Cullum. The confrontation had been swift, too swift. Words turned into threats, threats into violence. The blade flashed once, twice, too many times to count. Pain erupted like fire through Marco's body, stealing the air from his lungs. He collapsed onto the floor, his own blood pooling beneath him, staining the life he had worked so hard to build. As darkness crept in, one thought echoed louder than the rest. This isn't how my story ends. But sometimes, stories don't end the way we want them to. Between life and goodbye. Doctors and nurses rushed around him when he arrived at General Hospital, voices overlapping in urgency. Multiple stab wounds. Prep for surgery. BP dropping. Stay with us, Marco. Through blurred vision, he caught glimpses, faces he knew, voices he trusted. Lucas was there, his expression tight with fear masked by professionalism. Alexis stood in the corner, hands trembling despite her attempt to remain composed. And then there was Sidwell, his father. The man who had always seemed untouchable now looked broken. Stay strong, son, Sidwell whispered, gripping Marco's hand. You're stronger than this. Marco wanted to believe him. He wanted to fight. But his body felt like it was slipping through his own grasp, like sand through fingers. Memories in fragments. As the anesthesia pulled him under, Marco's mind drifted. Not into darkness, but into memory. He was a child again, sitting on the couch beside his mother. She laughed softly as she watched her favorite soap opera, her compact mirror resting in her lap. She always said stories mattered, that they helped people feel less alone. You'll have your own story one day, she told him once, brushing his hair back. And it will matter. Marco had carried those words with him his entire life. He saw himself years later, standing nervously at his first courtroom appearance. The fear, the doubt, the voice inside telling him he wasn't good enough. But he had pushed through. He had always pushed through. So, why couldn't he now? The truth of the heart. Back in the hospital, the surgeries stretched on for hours. Lucas worked tirelessly, refusing to give up. We're not losing him, he muttered under his breath, more to himself than anyone else. But sometimes effort isn't enough. Outside the operating room, Sidwell paced like a man unraveling. Alexis tried to speak to him, but words felt meaningless in the face of uncertainty. Marco doesn't deserve this, she said quietly. No, Sidwell replied, his voice cracking. He deserved better than me. That was the truth he had never admitted, not to Marco, not to himself. Love that remains. Far away, Colton stared at his phone, reading the message again and again. Marco's been hurt. It's bad. The world seemed to tilt beneath him. He remembered late nights running lines together, laughter breaking through exhaustion. He remembered the way Marco believed in people, fiercely, unapologetically. Don't be afraid to be who you are, Marco had told him once. That's where the magic is. Colton grabbed his keys, heart racing. He wasn't ready to say goodbye. The final moments. When Marco finally regained consciousness, it wasn't the triumphant return everyone had hoped for. The room was quieter now. Too quiet. Lucas stood at his side, eyes filled with a sadness he couldn't hide. "Hey," Marco whispered weakly. "Hey," Lucas replied, forcing a small smile. "You gave us a scare." Marco tried to laugh, but it came out as a shallow breath. "That sounds like me." Silence lingered between them, heavy with unspoken truth. Marco's gaze shifted around the room until it landed on his father. Sidwell stepped forward slowly, as if afraid the moment might shatter. "I'm here," he said. Marco studied him, really studied him, as though seeing him clearly for the first time. "You always are," Marco replied softly. It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't forgiveness. It was simply truth. What matters most. As the hours passed, more people came, friends, colleagues, those whose lives Marco had touched in ways he never fully understood. Each one carried a piece of him. Each one reflected a life that had mattered. "I never said thank you," Alexis admitted, her voice trembling. "For everything you did, even when it wasn't easy." Marco smiled faintly. "You don't have to say it now." "But I do," she insisted, "because you deserve to hear it." He nodded, closing his eyes briefly. Maybe his story had mattered after all. A quiet goodbye. Later that night, when the room had emptied and the world outside seemed to pause, Marco felt it, the shift. The quiet understanding that his time was running out. Lucas sat beside him, unwilling to leave. "You're not alone," he said. "I know," Marco replied. And he did. He felt it in every memory, every connection, every moment that had led him here. "My mom used to say stories never really end," Marco murmured. "They just change." Lucas swallowed hard. "Then this isn't the end." Marco smiled, softer now. "No, it's just a different chapter." The light beyond. As dawn approached, the first light of morning slipped through the window, casting a gentle glow across the room. Marco's breathing slowed. The monitor's steady rhythm began to falter. Lucas gripped his hand tighter. "Stay with me." Marco's gaze drifted upward, beyond the ceiling, beyond the room. For a moment he saw her, his mother, standing just out of reach, smiling the same warm smile he remembered. "You did good," she seemed to say. And for the first time since the attack, Marco felt no fear, only peace. The end of one story. The monitor let out a long, unbroken tone. Lucas closed his eyes, unable to stop the tears. Outside, the city moved on, unaware that it had just lost someone extraordinary. Sidwell stood frozen in the doorway, the weight of everything crashing down around him. Marco Rios was gone, but not forgotten. In the days that followed, the impact of Marco's life became impossible to ignore. Stories surfaced, small moments, quiet kindnesses, acts of courage no one had noticed before. He had fought for people who had no voice. He had loved without hesitation. He had shown up even when it was hard. And in doing so, he had left something behind that death could not take. A legacy of light. At a small gathering held in his memory, those who knew him came together, not just to mourn, but to celebrate. He wasn't perfect, Alexis said, but he was real. And that's what made him extraordinary. Lucas nodded. He made people believe in themselves, in something better. Sidwell stood apart at first, but eventually stepped forward. I didn't always understand my son, he admitted, but I know now he was better than I ever gave him credit for. His voice broke. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of him. The story continues. Somewhere, in the unseen spaces where memory and love intertwine, Marco's story lived on, not as a tragedy, but as a reminder that even the shortest lives can leave the deepest marks, that even flawed people can create something beautiful, that love, real love, never truly ends. And as the sun set over Port Charles, casting golden light across the city, it felt as though Marco Rios was still there in every heartbeat, every whispered memory, every story yet to be told. Because some characters don't fade away. They become part of something bigger, something lasting, something eternal.